Jennifer? Hey, Al, can you hear me? I'm just testing my mic.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I couldn't hear anybody else for a while, but now I can hear you.
Okay. I was having trouble with my speaker last time, so just getting it figured out.
Everybody's smiling this morning.
Okay, Jennifer, are you semi-ready to go? Okay, we will call the meeting back to order. I'd like to welcome our guests, both here at the Water Center and online. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes, and I suppose first off, approval of the agenda, and then approval of minutes 8-23 and 9-23.
Mr. Chairman, there's no need to modify today's agenda.
Okay, all right. Did anyone peruse the minutes and would like to approve them?
Mr. Chair, I did read through all the minutes and I would make a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, then that's both 8-23 and 9-23?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are to public comment. Do we have a public comment? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to give comment? Last time I looked, there was only one name on the list, so. Okay. Okay, all right, then we will proceed on to the next agenda item, legislative audit.
I think Cynthia will discuss that item.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and welcome to those of you online.
So Legislative Services, the Audits Division, completed an accountability report for the Department of Water Resources for the fiscal years of 2020 through 2022. And you all have a copy of that report in your materials. Now, we did discuss the legislative audit with the Finance Committee last week, but we want to make sure that all of the board members are aware of the finding that was identified in the report as it does pertain to the Water Resource Board's funds. And so just to review the finding itself, it states that significant errors were found in spreadsheets used to monitor the cash balances for the Revolving Development Fund, Water Management Fund, and the Secondary Aquifer Planning and Management Fund. The spreadsheets that are referenced in the finding are financial spreadsheets that are used to track and document activity surrounding the board's different funds. And they're also used to generate a report that you all see at your regular meetings. And it's referenced, of course, at all those bi-monthly meetings to review revenue, expenditures, the account balances, and when you all are making those funding commitments and funding allocations. So the audit identified issues with the revolving development account and the secondary fund. And specifically, it noted that there were formula errors found in the spreadsheet and the ending cash balance did not agree with the balances identified in STARS, which is the state's accounting system. For the secondary planning and management fund, the audit identified problems with the representation of expenditures, which resulted in either an overstatement of expenditures for specific projects or potentially an overstatement of the balance of the funding remaining for a specific project. Now, in general, the conclusion of the audit was that inaccuracies in the information that's provided to the board could lead to the board making commitments without the necessary available cash. And it recommended that effective controls need to be established to ensure that that data is properly entered into the workbooks and that those reviews are completed at a level to determine whether any errors are present. So I'd like to just summarize the steps that staff has been taking in response to the audit finding. First, staff has performed a review and reconciliation of the audit and the spreadsheets. And I'd like to note that though the finding itself references the revolving development account, secondary fund, and the water management account, there were no issues identified in the audit pertaining to the water management account or the accounting of the ARPA funds. Second, we want to be clear that the financial officer has been tracking those cash balances for all of the accounts and ensuring that they match the balances reflected in STARS. So that is a clarification that the agency will make with LSO. The issue that was identified in the audit is that those cash balances have not been adequately reflected in the reports that are provided to the water board as you're making those financial decisions. So staff has reviewed those revenues, expenditures, and commitments for each of the funds and reconciled the financial data, and that is provided in your board materials. Now, Neely Miller will speak to some of the details of those reports in his regular financial report, so I won't go into those right now, but I do want to summarize that as of December 31, 2024, which is what you see in your board materials, there was a positive cash balance in all of the accounts and that none of those accounts were overcommitted. So you did not overcommit available funds in any of the accounts, with the exception of the ARPA funding, of course, for which the board has chosen to obligate those funds and deliberately identified those projects and how to obligate funds based on anticipated appropriations. So in addition, all of the cash balances match the balances reflected today. So again, as of this reconciled report, all of the cash balances match the balances reflected in the STARS system, with the exception of the revolving development account, for which, interestingly, STARS indicates that you have a higher balance available for use than IDWR's records. So what you're seeing here is actually indicates that you have a lower available amount of funding than what STARS indicates. But IDWR's financial officer, Sasha Marston, is working to resolve that issue with the controller's office now. And as I understand it, she can speak to this in more detail, but that discrepancy has to do with just one single item. And again, our records for the board show that you have a lower balance, so there should be some comfort in that. So with regard to improvements to the tracking spreadsheets and implementation of the recommended improved controls, department staff are resolving any calculation errors in the spreadsheets. That's ongoing now. But we do recognize that the spreadsheets were developed some time ago, decades ago, let's put it that way. And they do need to be revised to more adequately allow staff to manage the increased activity in the board's accounts. And so we are working on that effort now. In addition, we are refining the monthly reconciliation and control processes to both improve and document those processes. That is a critical, I think, need with regard to coordinating with LSO. The department completes a monthly reconciliation of those cash balances now within each fund to determine that overall cash balance and to evaluate how much has been committed and uncommitted. But again, we will be refining that process and documenting that process further. So we're also working on an agency corrective action plan that involves, again, updating those tracking databases and incorporating those financial controls. And that action plan, I think, is still being reviewed, but will be introduced to LSO in the coming weeks and will be presented to JFAC, again, in some other meetings this January. So I'll just close and open it up to questions, but I do want to acknowledge Sasha Marston. Again, she's the department's financial officer, and she's put a concerted effort into responding to this finding. And we do have a number of other staff who've engaged with her to verify all of the inputs as we're clarifying and trying to identify any of the errors that were recognized. So with that, again, I'll stand for questions, and we have others to help as well.
Okay, any questions for Cynthia? Brian?
Just comment, if Cynthia, Chairman, sausage says we're good, then I say we're good.
Okay, any other questions? Cynthia, convey our thanks to Sasha and her team for all their efforts to keep us in line and everything in order so that we can pursue what we've been directed to do. So,
Excellent.
okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Financial report.
Yes.
Neely?
Neely will give that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Share here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As of December 31st, 2023, the board's available and committed balances are as follows. In the secondary aquifer fund, there's a cash balance of approximately $38.4 million, a committed, earmarked but not dispersed balance of roughly $31.2 million, and an uncommitted balance of approximately $7.2 million. In the board's revolving development account, the board has a cash balance of roughly $36.8 million, a committed balance of approximately $35 million, a loan principal outstanding of roughly $21.5 million, and an uncommitted balance of approximately $1.6 million. In the board's water management account, there's a cash balance of roughly $294.3 million, a total committed funds of approximately $257 million, and uncommitted funds of roughly $37.3 million. Taken together, these three accounts, the board has a total committed, earmarked, obligated, but not dispersed balance of roughly $323.3 million, a total loan principal outstanding of roughly 21.5 million, and a total uncommitted, unobligated balance of roughly 46 million. Speaking to the ARPA funds, the board has committed per House Bill 769, $100 million, and committed per Senate Bill 1181, roughly about 24 million. It has expended 75,664,568, and it is obligated 84,796,879. And then, as you heard Cynthia speak to earlier, there's that overcommitment of roughly 36 million that is unobligated, and that's due to that delay in the ARPA disbursement. And again, just to recall that by the end of 12/24, you must have that full 250 committed, which is why that overcommitment is there. With that, I would stand for any questions. I would just highlight there's a few notes there for some of the amounts that are in those accounts for your reference.
Okay, any questions for Neely?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you mentioned a delay in the 50 million, Neely. Is it a delay or a forfeiture of the 50 million that we didn't get last year?
I think it's a delay. I would let other folks, maybe Sasha, speak to that.
I think technically what happened is we did not fully allocate the first 100 million. And the portion of that first 100 million that we didn't have allocated, by the way that it was allocated to us, had to be pulled back. I think there's legislation that will address that and restore that to us this session, should the legislature decide to do that. And then that will cover that unobligated negative balance. And then we should get an additional $50 million allocation for this year, as I understand it.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. There should be another 50 million coming in March, and then another one in July.
Okay, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, Neely, just a little confusion for me because we've just kind of started keeping the ARPA separate fairly recently. So the 294 in the water management account does not include the ARPA funds anymore.
That is correct.
Okay. Neely, while we're talking about the water management account, you gave us some different numbers than is showing on the screen. Are those updated numbers that just aren't updated in this report?
Mr. Chairman, these are the updated numbers in this report. There have been some recent changes to it in the last week.
Okay, because I think you indicated the unobligated balance was about 36 or 37 million.
In the water management account?
Yes.
That is correct.
And I'm looking on screen and I'm seeing 107 unobligated. So I think we just need to clarify for the audience that it is 37 million, and this report reflects a previous.
That's correct. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
This is dated material on this report. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you. Okay, the governor's proposed budget.
Yes, Sasha will review that with the board.
Okay. While Sasha's coming up, I thank you once again, Sasha. I can't thank you enough for everything that you do to administer our portion of the financial work here at the department.
I'm not proficient with this.
If you were here earlier, you would have seen the board members not being proficient in getting their computers turned on. So we all have those deficiencies.
Or not. Go ahead if you turn it on. Oh, okay. Thanks. There you go. Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Sasha Marston. I'm the Financial Officer for the Department of Water Resources. And I'm going to give you a presentation about what our budget recommendation and the governor's recommendation is for water resources. The majority of the slides that you have in front of you but you don't have them in your book because I just got final approval from our DFM analyst yesterday afternoon to include some of these slides that we're going to be using for our JFAC presentation that's next Wednesday. So I wanted to wait till I had their approval before I published them. So I got those to Jennifer this morning. So this is what our starting of our budget recommendation is going to look like for the governor for FY 2025. The next slide is the slide that's given to, it talks about the comparative summary between what the agency requested and what the governor's recommendation was for the agency. And to go over this, I will talk in length about the reverted ARPA funding that's on the first, on line 1. And then I will go down and talk about the items that are 1 through 6 down below at the bottom, and then some of the budget law exemptions. But I think that talking about this reverted ARPA balance, that'll answer the questions that Ms. Cole-Hansen had about the ARPA funds. So let me go ahead and go forward. We have asked for some supplementals, and one of those is for the reverted ARPA funds that were reverted at the end of FY 2023. And what happened was, in order to have the funds that are appropriated in the agency to carry over into the next year, you have to ask for reappropriation authority. And there was some confusion between what we had put in our budget and what the legislators' intent was with this ARPA funds. Their full intent was to obligate the full $250 million to the board to spend for water projects. They were breaking that out between the first year being $100 million and then $50 million for the next 3 additional fiscal years. And what happened is at the end of FY 23, we had not spent all of the $100 million. There was about $25 million that had not been spent. So that had to be reverted back because we did not ask for reappropriation authority for that money. So what we've done in our supplemental for our FY 25 is we have asked for reappropriation authority to get that $25 million back in for FY 24. And then in our FY 25 budget, it's an ongoing $50 million that we'll get for FY 25 and FY 26, which will finish out the $250 million that the legislature intended for the board to use. And we have asked for that reappropriation authority, so we don't have to go through this again next year. And it was just an oversight. It's something that I've worked with legislators or legislative services with about.
Joanne, you have a question?
Yes, Sasha, I just wanted, and for everyone else, I wanted to make sure, since this money is coming in piecemeal over the next 2 years, yet the board has to have it committed by the end of fiscal year 2024, calendar year 2024, that we will be showing probably a deficit on our financial report for the next 2 years.
Yes,
Okay,
that is correct.
thank you.
Okay. So that's what's going on with one of our supplementals that we asked for this year. The next supplemental that we asked for was to add some intent language to our budget, and it's language for adjudication fees. The agency's appropriated general fund monies to support the adjudication program. And what those fees from the general fund are intended to do is to supplement or pay for the water right claims that were filed by the governor or the water board so that they don't have to turn around and use other monies to pay those fees. That money had not been, that intent language had not been included in our budget. So we've asked to request a supplemental to include that intent language so that going forward, we can have that language in there. So those are our 2 supplemental requests for the governor's budget. And the governor did recommend both of those supplementals in his recommendation. The next thing I'm going to talk about is our FY 2025 line items requests. If you go back and look at the comparative summaries, you'll see there's a big section in there that talks about FY 24 estimated expenditures, and then there's the FY 25 base, and then there's these small items in there that talk about personnel budget, inflationary replacement items, and statutory, statewide cost allocation, and then they talk about CEC. Those items are not going to be discussed at our JFAC presentation. They were part of the maintenance budget that was passed by JFAC earlier this week for all agencies. They just addressed those as a whole instead of addressing them with each agency. So that'll be a difference in what, if you watch the JFAC presentation or attend it, you'll see a difference in how they've normally done it. So we'll just go into talking about our line items that we asked for FY 25. This is a summary of what we asked for. And the first line item, I got these backwards. So the first line item is the $716,000 that we transfer annually from the revolving development fund into the agency's aquifer planning and management fund. This is used to support staff that do a lot of the hydrology work for us, and some additional staff that do most of its hydrology, but it's an annual transfer that we make. But we always have to request it because they cannot make it an ongoing. It has to be requested each year. So this is not a new request by any means. The next item is just a little thing. We had to move our salmon field office from their prior location to a new location because the person we were leasing from before did not want to renew the lease. So we needed to move in order to keep that office open over there. So it's just a small amount that we asked for an increase in our budget. They're looking at doing a conversion for some laserfish form creation of about $90,000. It'll help with being able to online file ownership changes. Google Earth Engine. This is so that when they are doing the evapotranspiration maps and the irrigation maps, this will create a much faster process with everything that I've read, and it'll reduce the time spent by staff having to hand do everything, and it'll eliminate some of the possible errors. And then mapping licenses, that's just an increase because with all of these mapping that we do for the agency, people are running out of space to do their work. Licenses are getting double used, and so it delays the time they can get stuff done and provide information to the public. The last one is not an item that we requested in our budget, but it was part of the governor's recommendation, and it's a $30 million transfer from the general fund to the Water Board's Water Management Fund, which is that fund that right now currently has about a $295 million cash balance in it, that there's about $37 million that's uncommitted. This and some of the projects that Brian has told me that they will be using this $30 million on potentially would be the Lewiston Exchange project, and then an additional round of aging infrastructure grants. This is the link, and this last one is the language for reappropriation authority that I was talking about for the ARPA funds, so that we can not have to go through this supplemental request again, and any money that we don't spend in FY 24 will be carried forward into FY 25, and then again, we'll ask for it in FY 25 for FY 26. So I think that is my last slide. Aren't you guys lucky? So if you have any questions.
Any questions for Sasha? I think we're good. I hope this was a good run through to get prepared for next week.
Well, thank goodness I don't have to do what Matt does.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you, Sasha. Okay, next up, federal affairs update. Mark Limbaugh. Welcome to you, Mr. Limbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here again this year. Kind of an update on not only what's going on in Washington, but kind of what we've been doing over the last year with the water board to help further your goals and objectives.
I'll just do this one. Okay, no, it's nowhere. It's good. Okay, as far as the FY24 federal appropriations process goes, you probably heard that we had a continuing resolution that was funding the federal government through March, actually through April, or through the end of this month, January 19th, and February 2nd were the two dates. And the reason those are two different dates is the current speaker, Johnson from Louisiana, wanted a laddered CR. In other words, 4 bills would come due first, and then the rest of the 8 bills would come due a week or two later. And what he's trying to do is keep the Congress from putting together all 12 bills into a huge omnibus, and that's something that they've always criticized as being a magnet for more spending and more, things that could happen. So, and he's right. We do look forward to those omnibuses to get stuff done. But in this case, they will probably have some mini buses that will probably have to be passed to move these bills into small tranches, not the total 12. But those dates have been extended since yesterday. The House passed, the Senate passed CR that extended those dates from January 19th to March 1st for 4 bills that include energy and water and the ag appropriations bill. Energy and water funds the Bureau of Reclamation and the Corps of Engineers. So they have a reprieve. There will not be a shutdown tomorrow for those agencies. And the balance of the bills, including Interior and Environment, which funds the Department of the Interior and the EPA, is extended to March 8th. So they have a reprieve, so now they can breathe easy and not worry about it until a week before March 1st to do this. Not true. They're working very hard to try to get their allocations to the different bills. The Speaker and the Majority Leader in the Senate came to a top line agreement a few weeks ago, so they're working to get those bills negotiated. As far as the differences between the Senate and the House on energy and water development for the Bureau, they're not too far apart, really. Looking at the almost $2 billion, they're about $81 million apart from each other. So we probably look for the House number to actually go up, maybe the Senate number to come down a little bit, but it'll be somewhere in between those two. On the Corps, the opposite is true. They are about about 700 million apart, but they're looking at plussing up from FY23 the Corps budget. So we'll look for those to be worked out in the coming weeks, and we'll see if they need another CR. Hopefully not. The Bureau of Reclamation, as you are aware, got about $8.3 billion in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed a couple of years ago. The Bureau has to come up with an annual spending plan. This is their third spending plan out of that act for FY24. And aging infrastructure loans are going to get $680 million out of the $3.2 billion that was appropriated. Those aging infrastructure loans are for federal projects that have been transferred. The operation and maintenance have been transferred to local districts, and those therefore they can apply for loans to fund extraordinary maintenance projects on those facilities. They can get upwards of 30-year terms at Treasury rates. And they can go up to 50-year terms on those loans if there's an ability to pay analysis done. So in other words, if they can prove that they can't afford a 30-year loan, but they can afford a 50-year loan, then they can get a longer term on that loan. And that program has been modified a bit just recently with a modification to one of Reclamation's directives and standards that we'll also talk about a little bit here later. The Wind Act storage projects, which include the Anderson Ranch raise, or can include the Anderson Ranch raise, is $240 million out of $1.1 billion. Those Wind Act storage projects are for not only the grandfathered projects like Anderson Ranch raise, but also other projects that meet the criteria that were in play when the Wind Act expired. And so we also have access to appropriated funds for Wind Act funding. Both the House and Senate bills had $134 million added to the $71 million that was existing, that was left over. So, once those bills are passed, they'll have over $200 million in that pot to also give out to Wind Act projects for storage projects that are underway, and that will include Anderson Ranch. So you have actually two sources of funding that you can get if the funding comes along that the price tag goes up. Federal government has to up their share. They'll have the funding to do it, from what I can see. Small storage grants at $25 million, so that's just metered out over the 5-year term of this program. A rehabilitation of reclamation projects suffering critical failure, which was limited to the Milk River project in Montana. They have $3.5 million. They got a lion's share of that funding already. The post-1905 Carry Act project rehabilitation, which we'll talk about in a little bit, there's $30 million in there out of the 100. That's for right now for one particular project in Wyoming. And then the WaterSmart grants are getting a bump again, $67 million for WaterSmart out of the 400 that was added to that. This is in addition to the amounts that are in the annual appropriations bills. Title 16 reuse grants are $29 million, and then the large reuse grants is $130. The large reuse grants are for projects that are over $500 million, which there's none in Idaho. Well, yet in Idaho. But there are some in Idaho that are looking at applying for some of the other reuse grants. Desalination projects, we got $30 million. Authorized rural water, which is Midwest, is $108 million. Dam safety, which is the Bureau of Reclamation's dam safety program, which has pretty stringent requirements for a federally owned reclamation dam to be able to qualify for that. That has advantageous repayment terms for districts that have to pay a part or all of those costs on those projects. And 130 million is the biggest to date out of that 500 million. And there's a big project in California called BF-CISC that's a big safety dam. So that's probably a large part of that. Cooperative watershed management grants, 20 million. That's a program that was fairly small before the IIJA, and they bumped up, put $100 million into it. So that's basically grants that start watershed groups, collaborative processes, those kinds of things. Aquatic ecosystem restoration grants is a new program that was established in IIJA. That's a 65% federal share for aquatic ecosystem projects in reclamation basins. That's 65 million out of the 250 that was total. And then multi-benefit watershed improvements, which is yet another new program that established in the IIJA that's mostly for environmental type projects, but also can have water quality, water quantity benefits. And that's a straight amortization of 25 million out of the 100. So there's a lot of funding coming out of the Bureau in FY24. We'll talk a little bit about those programs in a second. The Inflation Reduction Act was the other bill that was passed a couple of years ago. That was basically the administration's climate bill. Out of that bill, it was 1.7 trillion, I think. Out of that bill, 4 billion was allocated to the Bureau of Reclamation for Western drought mitigation. It was mostly pointed at the Colorado River Basin, but it did allow for other basins to participate in that grant program that are basically used to having multi-year droughts, which is pretty much every basin in the West. And also ecosystem restoration that's been impacted by drought in the West. So those funds are being announced. You'll probably see some of them in the Colorado Basin, both the upper and the lower basin in the Colorado, getting some pretty big funding for water conservation and water purchases, transfers, et cetera. And they're trying to shore up those big reservoirs like Meade and Lake Powell in that basin. Other basins looking at the funding include some in California, some in Washington State, some in Oregon, and I believe the Bureau may have some in this state that are looking for some of that funding, but that has not been announced yet. They're still contemplating that. There was $550 million in that bill for disadvantaged community domestic water supply programs or projects. The Bureau of Reclamation has typically not been involved in those, but now they are. I have not seen anything yet in terms of how that funding is going to be allocated. I think they're still working internally on some kind of program for that. And then there was a pilot demonstration project funding of $25 million for over canal solar projects. That's not a lot in the larger scheme of things, but they're trying to figure out how they can put solar panels on over canals, and mostly in the desert Southwest, but it could go anywhere. Some of the issues we've been working on for the board include some Bureau of Land Management issues. As you recall, we worked on getting the Aquifer Recharge Flexibility Act passed by Congress in 2021. And Section C3 of that act allows for BLM to provide easements on existing canal easements that have typically been used for irrigation. They can just simply use those same easements. We can use those same easements to run water for recharge. Well, there's been an interpretation issue with the local regional office and the solicitor out here that the water board is not qualified to be able to use that, and we'll have to get another easement. We worked through the local offices to try to get their attention, to try to get things changed. That we were not successful. So we worked with the Idaho congressional delegation to send a letter to BLM, to the director, to draw attention to the matter, try to get her to look at that from the perspective of, hey, look, this is not good policy. We want to see more aquifer recharge, not less. And we don't want to have to go through the red tape of having to get another easement on an existing canal that already has an easement. So we have not heard back. We just checked with the delegation staff last week. They have not heard anything back. So we're going to try to start pushing some buttons on that one. We did have a successful Washington, D.C. trip with some of the members of the board in June of last year. Met with the delegation staff, some key congressional committee staff, administration appointees at Reclamation and the Army Corps of Engineers, and had a great trip. So, it's always good to have the board have a presence back in DC. It's one of those things that if they don't know about you, they don't know about you. So we really want to continue, in my opinion, continue that process of having the board out there, because you guys have a lot of things going on, and everybody that was briefed by the board members was very impressed with what Idaho was doing. So it's a good trip. Also, Al Barker who's on the TV today. He testified in an oversight hearing on water availability before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water and Power in September. Did a great job, had a lot of questions, basically took over the dais, and I think he did a great job. So it was good to have a board member in front of that committee. A couple bills that we've been working on for Idaho interests include the Urban Canal Bill, which is S2160, and HR 6107, both the same bill, companion bills. That bill would provide for 35% non-reimbursable funding out of the aging infrastructure account that I talked about for extraordinary maintenance on canals of urban concern, or urban canals of concern. What an urban canal of concern is a reclamation-owned facility that has been, the operation and maintenance have been transferred to a local district that runs through a big city or an urbanized area. And that's not the fault of the farmers that are taking the water out of the canal, but they have to pay for it unless there's other programs or project, grants or something that can help. Typically, those projects are very expensive. They're more expensive than fixing a canal that's running through the desert, because you've got to fix it not only to a canal standard, you got to fix it to a flood control standard, basically. So it costs more to fix it. It costs more to mobilize the equipment, all that kind of thing through these subdivisions and communities. And so really there's a good story to tell about having the federal government help get those done, because otherwise what's going to happen and what is happening is they're going to try to fix these things a little bit at a time when they can afford it. And that all that does is push out the completion date and thus increase the risk of a failure. So this would also authorize a loan from the aging infrastructure account for the balance of that, for the balance of those projects as well. And would also allow for those loan proceeds to be used as a match for federal grant programs, which those loan proceeds are being repaid by non-federal funding. So they should be able to be used as a match to get a grant, to leverage those loans for other grant programs that can help get all these things done at once. So we're working very hard on that. We've had hearings. We had a hearing in the Senate last year on that S2160. We have not had a markup yet. We had a hearing last year in the House Natural Resource Committee, and we had a witness from the Boise Border Control testify. That was a very positive hearing. Had great response from the members of the committee. So we think we're going to have some pretty good traction there. A lot of it's going to depend on how CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, scores the bill in terms of what its cost is. We don't think the cost is that great, if at all, but CBO has their own rules and how they view these things. So we're going to be watching that very closely. The other bill that we've been working on is the S843 and HR 2694. This bill would open up that CARE Act funding I talked about. There was $100 million in there for that project in Wyoming. That would open up whatever balance of funding that is left in that fund, would open it up to other CARE Act projects, and specifically in Idaho. Milner Dam comes to mind. I think Mackey Dam might be a CARE Act project. And, even though we think that $100 million may be used up in Wyoming, there is a possibility, if we can get it, that other funds could be moved around to put more in there if there's a need. So that's what we're hoping to at least have our foot in the door if this bill passes. This bill has already been through committee. It's done in the Senate committee. It has not been through committee in the House yet, but we want to try to get that done this year. The Water Smart program grant opportunities are coming up. As I mentioned, there's a lot of funding out there for these grants. This is kind of a list. You have it there. It also has some due dates that we know of in particular. And looking at a couple of them that are out there, there is an April due date for that water strategy project grant planning and design and drought contingency plan grant. That's a new program. They've taken their water marketing program, moved it into a planning program. So those are cost share grants that can help fund project planning and design and drought contingency plans, out on the landscape. The other date that's coming up, the aquatic ecosystem, is too late this January, and we've already looked at that. It really wasn't anything for now. The water energy efficiency grants are something that a lot of folks in Idaho take advantage of, 50/50 cost share, and that's due February 22nd. Those are for fairly large canal automation, canal lining, a lot of the bigger projects that are out there. They can go up to $5 million federal. The other grants that are coming up is the Cooperative Watershed Management Program, and that's something that is due September 3rd. And that grant, again, talks about or it promotes collaborative efforts on the ground to get water projects solved and management improvements done on the landscape. So those are grants that are out there. We'd be happy to help the board and as we start looking into those for projects that are in Idaho. So I'll complete my presentation with a little recap of what's going on in both the House and Senate. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about the administration. I didn't do a slide on this because some of this has just happened. Radhika Fox, the Assistant Administrator for Water at EPA, is leaving the end of next month. So we're not sure of her replacement yet, but that's a pretty important position for a lot of the regulations that are coming out in terms of Clean Water Act regulatory actions and those kinds of things. WOTUS is kind of done other than in the courts, but there are other things like PFAS and some other stuff that's yet to drop. And then you're probably aware that the Deputy Secretary of the Interior has resigned, and he's been gone for a month or so. There's an acting person in that position as well. So we're not sure whether they're going to replace him with anyone at this point in the election cycle until we see who's going to be the next president. In the House of Representatives, the Republicans hold the control of the House 220 to 213 with 2 vacancies. The vacancies are Representative Santos from New York, who's expelled, and McCarthy, who resigned. Both of those, there's some special elections coming up to replace those. In the meantime, Representative Johnson from Ohio retires on the 21st, which is this next week. And Representative Scalise is out on health-related absence. So effectively, the Republicans only have a 4-seat advantage right now. So it's very close, very tight majority. It's as we've seen in the press, it's difficult to manage some of those. But Speaker Johnson was elected. He seems to have a good relationship with both sides of the aisle. He speaks very intelligently, and people kind of like him. So who knows what's going to happen? But it's right now, in my mind anyway, it's doubtful that they'll kick him out for working with the other side of the aisle, which that's what happened to Mr. McCarthy in October. Hakeem Jeffries from New York is still the minority leader, and they seem to be holding on to their 213 seats pretty regularly. And then, of course, some of the issues coming up, the Water Resource Development Act is coming up this year. Obviously the fights over climate policies, oversight hearings on Hunter and everything like that. But the Farm Bill is also something that we think is going to move this year as well. And then border security has been in the press a lot, and that's something that is currently an ongoing issue for both House and Senate. On the Senate side, there's 51-49, pretty split pretty evenly. You still need 60 votes in the Senate to do anything. 60 vote threshold, means that there has to be bipartisan agreement on many of the issues that come out. Although when they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, they used the budget reconciliation process, which only requires a simple majority. So that is one way to get things done, I guess. Very similar issues other than in the Senate, other than the nomination process. The Biden administration nominees have to go through the Senate to be confirmed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I conclude my speech for the day, and certainly would stand for any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for Mark? Brian?
Mr. Chairman, Mark, yes, regarding the CARE Act money and the safety dams issues at Miller Dam, that I know that MDI is going to talk to you a couple times, and he said there's legislation in there on that. And this board has allocated some money for part of that rehabilitation. Do you think there's a better chance this year of that CARE Act bill getting through than there has been the last couple? Or
well, I think, Mr. Chairman, Brian, I think it has as good a chance as anything. It's already been through the committee on the Senate side. We'll try to get somewhere with the committee in the House, because if you can get at least a hearing in there, it puts you in a better position when you're negotiating. A lot of it's going to depend on the end of the year negotiations and what they come up with in terms of either a public lands bill or the WRDA bill is another vehicle. So there's going to be some vehicles to move that will have some space for reclamation-based type legislation that's out there. So we're hopeful that we can get that done. There's no score to it at this point, so it's kind of non-controversial, but we need to get our foot in the door on that in case some money gets moved around or left on the table that we can maybe take advantage of.
Okay, Al, you've got your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mark. Is there any prospect for a deal with Senator Manchin on the Rish bill for the urban canals?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, that remains to be seen. We've already made a couple of tries of getting Mr. Manchin to come to an agreement. Mr. Rish has talked to him personally. And I think the main thing with Mr. Manchin at this point is the fact that there's some non-reimbursable funding. He believes that funding should be coming back to that revolving fund, the aging infrastructure fund, and not be doled out as grants. There's already a provision in law that allows that 35% to be doled out as a grant, and that's if in case of an emergency. Right now, our biggest problem with reclamation and this policy that I talked about earlier about the aging infrastructure account, it defines an emergency practically as something that has already failed or is imminently failing, which means the water needs to be running out of the bottom of the ditch in order to get any money to resolve that issue. And reclamation
So Mark,
has.
on that point, the reclamation's directive and standards modification didn't do anything to back off of that. Is that right?
No, but they did say, Mr. Barker, that they did mention that they would be willing to sit down and talk about how they view emergencies in the coming year. So there's still the door is still open to work the policy side of that issue. But in terms of the legislation that's coming out of an account that's already been appropriated, there shouldn't be a huge cost to it. And it does push these projects forward in a much more rapid sense. And there's not just Idaho, there's projects across the West that are in similar issues that are running through, major subdivisions and through town. That's been built up after the canal has been built. I think we have a chance in the House to try to move it. I think a lot of that's going to depend on what the cost ends up being on the CBO score. So we'll be working on that. But once we get that, we can see whether or not we can have a markup in the House and maybe make the House play to push it with the Senate in some kind of end of year negotiation. So we're just going to keep on it. This kind of how the sausage gets made sometimes. So nothing's really ever clean and clear in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Anything else, Al? Okay. All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for looking out for us in DC and taking care of us and shepherding us around town when we happen to be back there. We appreciate it.
You bet. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Priest Lake Dam modifications.
Mike Morrison will give us an update on what's going on with the construction of Priest Lake. Including some of the pictures that we talked about earlier.
Well, Chairman Raybould, members of the board, appreciate the opportunity to be here to give you an update on the Priest Lake Outlet Dam Improvements Project. It's mostly good news, so that's a change. I'm enjoying coming here for good news for you. That picture up there was actually taken this fall. I'll confess, I picked it because it looks kind of pretty. It's actually very cold, snowy, and dreary up there right now at the site. And that actually, when we talk about weather, you'll need to know that. So, okay, before I get started, I'd like to let you know that I made a little error to your briefing memo. It says that you're going to be considering a funding resolution for reasons I'll discuss later when we get to costs and change orders. I didn't bring a funding resolution for you. So I'll talk about project status first, then we'll move into talking about the void under the dam, and that void under the dam is completely fixed. It's done, finally. We also found another, some defective work from the previous contractor while we were there that took us a couple of days to fix. I'll talk to you about the costs of these fixes and the delays that were caused by them. And there's any questions down at the bottom, but of course you can ask questions anytime you want. So, okay, project is 2 weeks behind schedule. Now you may recall that when I was here in November, the project was ahead of schedule. And the difference is primarily, but not exclusively, due to the fact that we held or we suspended all critical path activity so that the attorneys could get up there and take a look at the dam. So that took them about 2 weeks to get up there, and that put us about 2 weeks behind schedule. We got a couple of other reasons. Obviously, the repair work took some additional time we didn't anticipate. I'll get to that in a minute. Weather permitting, we'll be back on schedule by February 1st, and that would put us in line for an on-time completion, which is good because we don't really want to go into season 5. In fact, weather permitting, we may actually be able to be on track by next week. We may be able to pour the last bit of concrete tomorrow. The issue with the weather is that placing concrete below 30 degrees is something that isn't a good idea. And the concrete plant up there, as I've explained to a couple of you folks, the concrete plant, they don't even turn it on when it's below 30 degrees. So it's going to have to be 30 degrees at the concrete plant, 30 degrees at the job site, and they'll be able to bring concrete down. It looks like it's going to be close to 40 degrees tomorrow. So weather willing, we will be able to place concrete tomorrow. That'll be the last bit of the apron. I'll show you where that is in the pictures when we get to it. So crossing my fingers here. Let's start out with the void beneath the dam to kind of orient you here. Let's see. At the back there, let's see, does this give me a little laser picture? And I don't want to shoot anybody's eyes.
You might use the mouse, Mike.
Okay, yeah, we'll use the rodent over here. Okay, this is the hole under the dam. We'll talk about that in just a second, but to orient you, this is the old slab that was built in 1978. This is the slab here, or the end of the slab that was done by the previous contractor that they placed. This is the slab that's under, there's actually some litigation about, remember it got inundated and didn't get a proper cure. And you can, we'll get into it, but you can see that there's been some concrete kind of fall off. And there's debated whether that was due to the previous contractor's work or not. Of course, we think it is, but to this hole under the ground, we knew there was going to be a hole under there when we got to it. We believed, and from the outside, this hole doesn't look that different from what I would expect it to look like. Big enough to let water through. We had believed that we probably could take a couple of wheelbarrows full of concrete, a couple of guys with hand tools, shovel it in there, and that would be sufficient. We budgeted $2,000 for it. Okay, so that's how much is in the contract, is $2,000. We got that one wrong, as you probably have seen. So we got it wrong. And let's see. Void was a lot bigger than we expected. And to kind of orient you here, this is actually just looking right through that hole that you just saw. And when you look into it, it's about 18 inches tall. You know, from the top here, this is the bottom of the dam slab, down here to the bottom, to the top of the material that's left behind after it's been eroded. 18 inches, 12 inches in some places. It goes back and you can't quite see the extent of it. It's around the corner here. I've got another slide that shows you kind of where you can see the end of it. We had to go put a GoPro on the end of a gaffing hook, and then we put that on the end of some PVC pipe and fed it on in there until we could see the very, very end of this thing. So it's a little over 20 feet back in that direction. If you take a look to your right, it goes about 10 or 12 feet in that direction. So it's quite a bit bigger than we had anticipated. You see all that water in there. Lots of concerns about the water. Now, I would like to point out that there's no real reason to have to use concrete under there to fill that void. We would be happy with just putting back the same kind of sand and gravel mix that was originally under there when the dam was built. Problem is you can't flow that stuff. It doesn't move very well. If we were there with shovels, we could put it in, but we're not. We're going to have to find a way to pump it back there. You can pump concrete much, much more easily. You can place it a lot more easily. So the primary reason we're talking about concrete is not because it's got any structural quality we want. It's because we can place it more easily, so we can get it back there. So I'm going to be talking though about the concrete mix because that's important. We looked at that water and we said, if we try to put concrete back there, it's just going to get in the water and slump. Worse yet, it's going to get into the water. It's going to entrain some of that. It's going to wind up back out in the river. And clearly the folks who've issued our permits, the Corps of Engineers, EPA, that kind of, those folks are not going to like that. So we had to make sure that we got around that. Another issue with it is you can see that that's over 20 feet. This is a dam slab. It was designed to sit on the ground. It's not designed to act as a bridge. The reinforcing material's in the wrong place. So there was a real concern that it could break. There's another concern though, that as you're pumping that concrete back there, that you can overpressure it, cause pressure from underneath and cause it to break going this way too. So you have to design the concrete in a way that you can deliver it with a high enough viscosity that it doesn't slump in all that water. And yet, once it gets back there, it's not going to be able to produce enough pressure to produce enough upthrust on that to cause it to break. So we had to spend a few days trying to figure out how to do that. Viscosities change a lot with weather, so it's very temperature dependent. And one of the issues is this was happening over between Christmas and New Year's. Finding somebody who's willing to do it and work with you over the holidays is not always that easy either. So, okay, another picture. This actually, if you look really closely right there, that's kind of the end of the void. So. Okay, so repairs. There's actually a bigger picture of this, but this kind of shows you got all these pipes that are back there, and you're probably wondering what all those pipes are all about. They're 2-inch PVC pipes. We put them back to various places back there. They serve 3 functions. The first function, as you can see down here, is to let you pump concrete back in there. The second function is they're put in places where we believe that air would build up and prevent the concrete from flowing, so they're an air release. And the third thing is when you start to see concrete flowing out of that pipe, you know you've got that nook and cranny filled, and you can move on. So the way to do this was progressively. We were going to put in what they call lifts. We were going to put in one lift, then move the pipes back, do another lift, move the pipes back, do it again. We were going to do it all in 8 lifts. It turns out that it went very smoothly. And after the first lift, we were able to kind of do it one continuous movement. So it went very smoothly. Everything went according to plan. Don't want to jinx that, but everything did go according to plan on it. And yeah, that's just pipes under the dam and like that. We were able to minimize turbidity. The contractor and the cement folks recommended an additive to put into it. Like I said, this is a very big concern that we were going to get that concrete entrained into river water. Put an additive into it. That additive kept that, it was clear. It kept that from happening at all. So that was pretty good too. So like I said, we got the concrete mix right. Things went according to plan, which don't know if that'll happen again. So. Okay, and void repair was complete. And you can see that's a top view of that same area. Just to kind of orient you, these pipes here are now permanent part of the structure. We're just going to cut the ends of them off and leave them there as part of the structure. This area here that you can see, that's going to be the next pour and the last pour in this. Hopefully it'll happen tomorrow. So this will hopefully the next time you see this, this will be just an extension of the concrete apron. This pier right here, you can see that was a known issue. It's actually at the moment kind of demolished down about 2 feet so they can repair all that decaying concrete on it. Okay, over here on the this slab here, up until about the 6th of December, there was form work over here. So we couldn't see what the edge of the slab, or for that matter, what was under the dam. We got all the rocks out of here. We got all the form work out of here. And this was not what we had expected, this slab here. You can see that it's uneven. Evidently the forms moved. That meant that this was somewhat out of specification. It was about 3 inches larger right up here than it was supposed to be. I'm going to show you some more pictures with some issues in it. This is a slab that is under consideration in our litigation with the previous contractor. because we're afraid that the concrete got cured improperly and it's not strong. You can see there's this spall right there. These two little black spots, those are two of the places that the previous contractors, legal experts cored the dam at. So that was two of their coring spots. This is another place that the testing was done, Windsor probe testing. Anyway, so before I move on, are there any questions about the void?
Any questions? Dean?
So there was a pretty good flow of water. I mean, any estimates on the flow of water that was there to excavate that size of void in that amount of time?
Let's see, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, there was quite a bit more water flowing through there before that dewatering system was put in place. At the end of the presentation, I got a picture of it's a flume that directs the water past it. One of the issues was that starting about mid-December, we wound up with a lot of extra snow melt up there. And that snow melt meant that we had to use the entire dewatering system. We had believed we were only going to be able to use, had we gotten up there to do this on the 6th, like we wanted to, we wouldn't have had as much water. You wouldn't have seen that water inside of it. This right here is an artifact of having to open all of the available gates. There's only 3 of them that are available. Open them all wide open and get all the water we can out of the dam to keep the dam from rising. So we had to direct that water somewhere, wound up a lot of it going underneath the dam. So that's mainly where the water you saw was. Previously, that water was just coming directly from the other side of the river and on through there. We had stabilized it after the previous contractor left. But you can see there was a pretty good sized hole. You can see that hole extends underneath this portion of the dam, which is what the contractor put in, which suggests that it was not a pre-existing condition, I guess, doesn't it? So, and incidentally, you can see that we've cut down, had it been a pre-existing condition, it should have been very, very obvious when they were doing this. So did that answer your question, sir? Okay. Okay, any other question?
Brian had a question.
Oh, yeah.
So, very good picture. Did you have a remote camera, get in and take those, or did you crawl in and take them?
Mr. Raybould, Mr. Olmstead, I don't think any of these pictures were pictures that I had taken. It's actually only about that high, and well, maybe in an earlier day I could have crawled in there. These were all taken at the end of a PVC pipe or a gaffing hook that we put in. I did take quite a few pictures of it, but these particular ones, I think these were taken by DEA, that's David Evans Associates. There are folks on the ground, and I think some were done by Mont McDonald. But my pictures didn't look as good. Other questions?
Jennifer's saying Mark may have a question.
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead, Pat, and then we'll go to Mark.
Mike, what was the additive to the concrete? Was it a super plasticizer?
That was one of the additives. We had a plasticizer. We also had actually, I think he called it a deemulsifier, which kept the cement itself from getting and training into the water. I believe his term for it was a deemulsifier. That was a new one to me. I hadn't seen that before.
Okay. Mark, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you. What was the volume of material that it took to fill the void?
It came out to 5 cubic yards, almost even. A lot bigger than 2 wheelbarrows.
I would assume it cost a little more than the $2,000 you had budgeted then.
Yeah, Mr. Gibbs, I'm going to show you the damage here in a couple minutes, but it was quite a bit more than $2,000.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Mike, let's continue.
Okay, so this was one of the things I've shown you kind of the overhead view of this, but this was the edge of the slab that the previous contractor left. And we, like I say, it was behind formwork, behind rocks and formwork that were left by the previous contractor. So we didn't actually see this until December 6th when we looked at it. So this repairing this wasn't planned. You can see that the form has moved in a couple of places. Over here, you can see that there's some cold joints. We expected we might have this one here because of the way it was poured. This one here was unexpected. The real big issue for us, it's out of dimension. We had to carve some of it back, but the real big issue is this plastic liner here. That plastic liner was part of the dewatering system that the previous contractor was supposed to have put in to prevent erosion like that hole under the dam. It is supposed to lie right up here against the side of this slab. As you can see, it's in the wrong place. We didn't, the piece of plastic is about 3 to 3.5 feet long. We weren't sure how far it went back there. Obviously, you can't have a piece of plastic in a slab or they're not joined. So we were going to have to go back to the end of that. We feared that plastic had floated up. It could have gone back as much as 3.5 feet. It turns out it didn't go anywhere near that far back. We're happy about that. More of the plastic here. Turns out it only went back a few inches. So, but we had to demo that. That took an extra couple of days that we hadn't anticipated. So they demolished it back about 6 inches till they got all of that stuff out of there. They exposed the surface. They've actually done some more work with it since you've seen this, so that it's all ready for that concrete pour that'll be there. And just as a refresher, this is where the hole under the dam was. It's got a piece of plywood over the top of it so the workmen can work there. So this was that little bit of a surprise that we saw. Any questions about this?
I think we're good.
Okay, that's the flume, and it's doing its job there. It was very, very full at this point. This doesn't show it, but it was very close to overtopping. We were quite concerned about that during the month of December. Costs. So I'd like to point out that the work that we saw cost extra money. The major costs that were associated with the delay. Baseline cost to idle that site, because the contractor is renting so much equipment, is somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 a day. So anytime you delay it for 2 weeks, you're talking right there close to $250,000 just for doing that. That is a very large fraction of the additional cost. So you look at the cost of getting somebody out there to put grout in it, you're looking at these other costs. Yeah, those are unexpected costs, but just having to idle the site for several days to wait for litigators to come up, and it turns out to do the additional work. And then for cold weather, that's where the costs really are. So we're still negotiating change orders with North Bank. Of course, I always like to do this before we do the work, but we didn't really have time here to do that. Any delay costs that we could directly assign to litigation were broken out into change order number 3. That'll be paid through the litigation budget that you folks have approved with Megan Carter. All other costs, about $370,000 go into change order number 4. Ultimately, I think these come out of the same pot of money anyway. So now there's about $600,000 in undispersed funds from the revolving development account that the board approved for this project 3 years ago. The way they're approved actually specifies the name of the contractor in it. So originally I was going to come in here and provide you a funding resolution just to let me use that money for this. Looks like somebody has found a better use for that, and we're not completely done negotiating with the contractor. So I don't have a funding resolution. It's possible that I may come back in March and ask for water management account funds if somebody else finds a better use for that $600,000 from the revolving development account. So I don't have a funding resolution for you today, but either to allow me to use that money, to repurpose that money, or to allow us to use water management funds. I'll be back in March. More questions?
Okay, any questions? I think we're good. I think you're doing a good job. Nice to hear progress.
Al.
Oh, Al's got a question. Al's following the protocol of using the hand sign versus just interrupting like I do. Go ahead, Al.
It's really hard for me to do it this way, following protocol, sorry. On this, on these two change orders, 3 and 4, one says directly assigned to litigation, and the other is additional costs, right?
Let's see.
So,
Yeah, Mr. Ray, oh, I'm sorry.
But so my question is, the change order 3, the 80,000, is that just time related associated with the litigation? And that the 370, is that for the fixing the void that may have been caused or was caused by the previous contractor?
Let's see, Mr. Raybould, Mr. Barker. Very good question. So what we did was we actually held the site. The litigators were on site for 4 days. During that 4 days, we had workers at the site supporting them. Prior to them getting there, we had to reorganize the site so that they would have access so that it wouldn't all be underwater. So we actually had to reorganize the dewatering system and then put it back the way it was supposed to be. There's those costs. We allocated 4 days of delay to it since they were up there for 4 days. Some of that delay, obviously, we were able to use that planning for the grout plan and things like that. So they got four days of delay costs, and they got another, the remainder of that is direct support from those 4 days and having to redo the dewatering system and then put it back together after they left. And as it turns out, that wasn't completely successful because there was a lot more water in there than we'd anticipated. On the 6th, it would have worked really well. By the 20th, when they got up there, we had to get that water out of there, out of the lake. We didn't want to overtop the dam or anything like that. That answer your question, sir?
Maybe just to follow up on that, Mike, these costs that are assigned to change order number 4 are all additional costs to remedy the previous contractor's work, or the bulk of that was?
That was the rationale behind this decision. Portion of it is just simply, we wanted to split it out so that it would actually be easier for the litigators to identify what was what.
But these are costs that we believe were additional costs caused by the former contractor. So all of that is going to be part of the resolution of our dealings with the previous contractor.
That is a true statement, sir.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, sorry,
Brian.
just one more, next slide there, Mike, that I just had.
The next slide is just,
The crank, yeah. So we're pretty well done repairing the stuff that was the void under it and everything. So the right-hand 5 gates or whatever, that slab still has to be redone then.
so let's see.
Water and new concrete on that right-hand side of the slide there.
Oh, let's see, Mr. Raybould, Mr. Olmstead. This up here, can you see my cursor okay?
Yeah.
I can, so let's see. This here is, was done by the previous contractor. The portion that got inundated and probably didn't get cured correctly is this portion here in front of the tanner gates. The contractor did place the slab over here, and it's this segment of the slab that's remaining. The way that's going to be done, of course, is to use this crane to help move everything in there. They use that to hold the concrete, pour the concrete. And once that's done, they will be able to dismantle this crane and move it. That crane is quite a bit of money every day just sitting there doing nothing, because that crane could be used for something else. They place the concrete with it. Once that's done, there's going to be some work dismantling this site, and then that crane will be dismantled and gone. And at that point, we don't incur any more costs of the crane. So some of the costs that were incurred early, if we had gotten ahead and stayed ahead, we would have been able to recoup those costs by not paying that on the back end. But we no longer can do that. So.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, so there is no need to dewater that right-hand side of the river.
It currently is actually dewatered. It's this side of the river that has no water in it right now.
Yeah.
And so by the time they put that together, these tainter gates will all be adjusted and in place. And at that point, we'll be running the water through this side so that we can work on this side here.
No more concrete work on that.
Well, there's this one thing right here still needs to be done. Hopefully we can get that done tomorrow. It's this concrete right here, right in front of the dam there. This area that you folks were looking at is right there. This is where the hole under the dam was. I like to say was because it's not there anymore. Does that answer your question?
Okay. I think we're good.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, of course, I think you all know where to find me.
Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, press on. Yeah, I think we're okay for a minute. Okay. City of Hagerman, Billingsley Creek.
Yeah, Amy Castle will be on Zoom and give us that update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jennifer, could you bring up the memo, the board materials, please? While she's doing that, I do have a memo on this topic. I have just a couple of brief topics for you this morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is the city of Hagerman, and this is an update on the status of the transfer that they filed with the department. So just a little background information. This was originally brought to the board's attention, or most recently at a Streamflow committee meeting about a month ago on December 18th. So just a little background, there's an agreement between the Idaho Department's Parks and Rec and the city of Hagerman. They received a portion of an irrigation water right, which the source is Florence Livestock Spring. That spring is tributary to Billingsley Creek. It's an irrigation water right with a 4/1/1900 priority date. So back in 2021, the city applied to the department to transfer 1 CFS of that water right, to transfer it from a year-round, or from a irrigation season of use to a year-round municipal use. The board did not protest this transfer, and in fact, no protests were received on this transfer. Back in February of 22, the department issued a preliminary order and approved the transfer for 1 CFS, but for the irrigation season use only. So the city has requested a hearing on that approval and is participating in an informal settlement process with the department, trying to secure that municipal to a year-round season of use. The department's primary concern is changing that irrigation right from an irrigation season use to a year-round season of use, and the potential injury to the board's water right and several other water rights in that system. So at the Streamflow committee meeting last month, we were asked, the board asked us to participate in a meeting with the city of Hagerman and their legal counsel, Travis Thompson. And I did attend that meeting back a few weeks ago on January 9th. And essentially, we were discussing a path forward on this issue of the season of use. While that discussion included possible conditions and maybe some agreements with parties on the system, there is no clear path to a resolution yet. But the department asked Travis and the city of Hagerman to draft some proposed conditions and submit them to the department for their review. So I will continue to coordinate on that effort with board members as conditions or if a settlement proposal is presented. So That's really all I have on that topic right now. If there's any questions, I can take those now, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Amy? I'm not seeing any in the room. Al doesn't have his hand up. Mark, okay? Okay. All right, I think we're good to continue, Amy.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, the next topic I have this morning was also brought to the Streamflow Enhancement Committee back in December 18th. So Jennifer, if you could forward to that next memo, please. There is a resolution, so I am asking for approval of an attached resolution on this topic. So this relates to the Lemhi River Basin Settlement Agreement, and specifically the McFarland minimum stream flow that the board holds in the Lemhi River Basin. At that last committee meeting, it was discussed that the Lemhi Settlement Implementation Steering Committee met. They are tasked with overseeing the implementation of the agreement and basically as a collective determine how to implement the agreement. And specifically, we were discussing the issue of the Lemhi River McFarland minimum stream flow. And so the resolution in front of you addresses 3 steps. And if we go down to 53, this is really the crux of the resolution. Line 53, the Lemhi Settlement Steering Committee determined that these following steps need to be completed in order to formally exercise the McFarland minimum stream flow. So 1 is the permit and accounting of stream flow maintenance water rights. Those are due July 1st of 2024. So we are coming up on that deadline. The second step is the establishment of a McFarland minimum stream flow effectiveness monitoring program. The agencies will work together and also obviously with input from the water users, develop that monitoring effectiveness program. And then third, we're working on an assessment of what this increased flow from the McFarland exercise, the potential effects of that. So in the meantime, while we work on those 3 steps and try to resolve those steps, on line 63 in this resolution, if what we would like to see occur is if there is an opportunity to exercise the McFarland minimum stream flow, this would be a voluntary exercise in the meantime while we determine these 3 steps. The water users would like to get credit and have it be counted towards the 2 and every 5-year period. So that's line 66 of the resolution. So that's really what this resolution is trying to accomplish. We need to resolve these 3 steps, but in the meantime, if there's an opportunity to exercise voluntarily the minimum stream flow, the water users would like to get credit for that. So that's really what I'm asking for today is the committee did recommend this resolution. So I'm hoping for an approval of this resolution from the board today, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Amy's presented this resolution to us. Are there any questions for Amy or amongst ourselves discussion about the resolution? Brian.
Quick question, Mr. Chairman. Amy, so by voluntary exercise of the right, it means that we won't pay them to cease purchases on this voluntary resolution?
Mr. Olmstead, I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you. Could you say that again?
Amy, why don't you let me field that question? This doesn't have anything to do with funding for change, altering stream flows. Brian, this is part of the settlement agreement in recognition of the folks with the high flow water right condition in their water right, having that transferred into a stream flow maintenance water right. They agree that for a period of 3 days, 2 out of every 5 years, they will not divert that high flow water and allow it to come down to meet this minimum stream flow at the McFarland campground. And we don't have everything incomplete with regard to having those stream flow maintenance water rights in place. So between now and then, if the group voluntarily sees an opportunity to meet that minimum stream flow, they can do that voluntarily, and that will count to one of the 2 events that's required every 5 years. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Dean?
Mr. Chairman, last year when they were talking about doing that flushing flow, they had a conflict down the stream. Has that been resolved going forward, or? is that
Yeah,
going
Mr.
to-
Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, it has not been resolved. So that's partly why you're seeing this resolution right now, is because we are working on resolving that issue.
I think this gives some guidance to the advisory committee as to whether they can move forward with having that minimum stream flow event or not. Versus last year, I think there was some uncertainty about whether they could even do it. And I think this is to clarify that. Is that correct, Amy?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Pat.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to adopt the resolution for steps needed to exercise the Lemhi at McFarland minimum stream flow.
Okay, there is
I'll second.
it's been moved and seconded. I think we can do a voice vote on this. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, now we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we will take a short break, maybe 10 minutes. And then we'll be back online. Thank you. Okay, board members, if we can reassemble ourselves, maybe we'll reconvene the meeting.
Morning, Matt.
Okay, Brian, the next item up is
Water supply.
water supply bank.
We'll have Mary talk about water supply bank finances, and she has a resolution for you.
Okay, welcome, Mary.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I am requesting the board's consideration and approval of a resolution to increase the board's bank rental fee rates. The board is responsible for the operation of the bank, including the board's bank, and you have the authority to collect fees and change those fees as you determine. The last rental rate schedule was adopted in 2012 and provided incremental rate increases from 2013 through 2030. The final rate change went into effect in 2023, raising the rental rate to $23 an acre foot. The board keeps 10% of the rental fee rate for administrative costs. Each year, we've presented the operational costs and the revenue that's generated through the board's bank, and there has been a deficit for more than a decade. We've been reviewing financial transactions for the board's bank over the last couple of years, trying to find where we can meet that deficit by adjusting some of the costs. Last month, I met with the Water Supply Bank Committee and presented some of those alternative fee measures, which could make the operation of the board's bank revenue neutral. This included an average rental fee rate, which would be necessary to meet the operational costs of the bank for a 5-year period from 2018 through 2022. Although per year, it wouldn't have met all of the year's costs, some together it would have covered all of the costs cumulatively. After seeing this information, the Water Supply Bank Committee unanimously supported increase in the rental fee rate to the average of $32.50 an acre foot beginning in 2025 to cover the operating costs, with an option to revisit and adjust as necessary in the future. After we left the meeting, I realized that perhaps I would request that you choose a whole number so that I am not working with decimal places, which creates rounding on odd numbers. So I would request that the fee is either $32 or $33 if the resolution is adopted, which is the next page in your meeting materials. So sorry, didn't share the screen. Before I go into the resolution, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Any questions for Mary?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I do have one question. Mary, it mentions the board's bank beginning in 2025. Is that fiscal year 2025 or calendar year 2025?
Mr. Chairman and Member Cole-Hansen, that's for the calendar year, not the fiscal year.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, why don't you walk us through the resolution?
Thank you. So starting line 1, Idaho Code 42-1761 established the Water Supply Bank. And whereas Water Supply Bank rules subsection 30.01 establishes that the board can determine a rental price. And whereas the last increase was in March of 2012, which was a schedule based on the Snake River Water Rights Agreement in 2004, also known as the NISPERS Agreement. The rental rate increased to $23 in 2023, consistent with this agreement. And whereas the revenue generated by these fees from years 2013 through 2022 has not been sufficient to cover the operating costs of the bank. On December 18th, the Water Supply Bank Committee for the board reviewed options to increase the bank revenues and support operating costs and recommended that the board increase the board's bank rental price. This I put $33, but this could be $32 or $33 if you would accept my recommendation that we choose a whole number versus $32.50. And then beginning on line 20, Now therefore, that unless otherwise agreed to between the lessor and renter and approved by the Director of the Department of Water Resources, the price for rights rented from the board's bank beginning in 2025 shall be $33 per acre foot. And the rental price includes a 10% administrative fee at a minimum of $3.30 an acre foot.
Okay, any questions on the resolution? Oh, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is Mark. I move that we adopt the resolution and set the rental rate at $33 per acre foot.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. This should probably be a roll call vote. Jennifer?
Mr. Barker?
I don't
Ms.
see.
Cole-Hansen? Aye. Mr. Gibbs?
Aye.
McMahon?
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone?
Aye.
And Chairman Raybould?
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right, now the next part of
Yeah.
water supply bank?
Right. Cynthia will talk about a potential program improvement review that staff is planning.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This should be quick. We just wanted to really bring this topic to your attention. So the, as Brian mentioned, the staff is planning to initiate a review of the program in response to a request from board members and Director Weaver. I think everyone here is aware that the water supply bank is an important program and it's used by water users statewide for a variety of different reasons. But it's often used to address near-term water supply needs. And at the December 18th Water Supply Bank Committee meeting that Mary mentioned, committee members also discussed the growing reliance on the water supply bank and the increase in lease and rental applications. And there was quite a bit of discussion about potential options to support staff in administering the bank and also to just improve application processing time. So in response to those comments from the committee members and direction from Director Weaver, we as staff are going to go ahead and initiate a review of those program processes to identify potential options, again, for some improvement or opportunities for administrative efficiencies, but also to address and review any potential procedural questions that impact those processes, and certainly those questions that have arisen over the past number of years based on the demands on the bank, the uses of the bank, and again, the reason that the water user is seeking the bank as an avenue for providing those water supplies. So I think the specific or initial goal will be to identify options to allow the department to reduce the application approval time, but there may be other issues that we want to consider in that process. At this time, I don't have a timeline for you or a detailed, scope of what that process will look like or that review will look like, but we will get back to you with a report and some more details about that effort, and would expect Mary and myself and other team members in the Planning and Projects Bureau, as well as coordination with other IDWR staff. We'll work with the Water Supply Bank Committee members as we move this forward. That said, if any board members or committee members have any comments today, or if the director has any comments, we'd be happy to take those as we move forward with this initiative.
Okay, any questions for Cynthia?
Great.
Dean?
I think that's a great idea to go through these procedures.
Excellent.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Aging Infrastructure Grant Awards.
Yeah, Neely Miller will take this item.
Welcome back, Neely.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you'll recall, the application period for the board's fourth round of aging infrastructure funding closed on December 1, 2023. The board received 19 applications requesting approximately $7.7 million. These applications were evaluated, scored, and ranked according to the criteria adopted by the board. I guess I should share this. Oh. Sorry about that. Over the first 3 rounds, the board is awarded over $36 million. On January 11th, 2024, the Finance Committee met and discussed the projects and recommended the board approve grant awards as specified in attachment A included with the resolution. Scroll down here to the attachment A is first. And you can see here that the awards total of $7,678,350. There was one project here that was determined not eligible because it was a study. And again, most of the projects here you can see are canal lining or measurement modernization type projects. And with that, I would stand for any questions or comments about the resolution.
Okay, board members, any comments, questions about the resolution? We have a resolution before us. I think this has all been well thought through in the Finance Committee, and I think we have a recommendation from the Finance Committee to adopt these projects.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass resolution to award funds in this round of the aging infrastructure grants.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? There being none, we'll proceed to vote. So can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barker, absent. Aye. Mr. Gibbs.
Aye, but I would note for the record that I have an interest in line item number 7, the Last Chance Canal, where I'm a minority stockholder, one of 160 stockholders. But I vote aye.
McMahon.
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Vanstone.
Aye.
And Chairman Raybould.
Aye. I also have a conflict on line item 12 of the attachment. Okay, motion carries. Okay, Regional Water Sustainability Priority List, is that you, Neely?
It is, Mr. Chairman. After this brief presentation, you'll be asked to consider resolutions to approve terms and conditions for selected regional water sustainability projects. Just a little bit of background. This past July 23rd, the board meeting in Moscow, the board approved 9 regional water sustainability projects for a total of approximately $59.4 million. Those projects were funded with American Rescue monies and state surplus funds allocated through the board's water management account by Governor Little as part of his Leading Idaho initiative and the Idaho legislature. Today, you'll be asked to consider terms and conditions approval for American Falls Spillway Rehab, Gooding Flood Control, and the Lost Valley Reservoir Enlargement. As you'll recall, at the November board meeting, you approved conditions for the City of Nampa projects, the North Fremont Canal System, and the Treasure Valley Water Supply Study. At the Finance Committee on January 11th, 2024, staff discussed the terms and conditions for these 3 projects bolded above, and attached to this memo are resolutions with the recommended terms and conditions from the Finance Committee. And so attached to this memo are 2 resolutions. The first is a resolution to approve contract terms for American Falls Spillway with an attachment A. And here's that resolution. And I would just reference, there is an attachment A here, and this was all reviewed by the Finance Committee. I'd be happy to review it again if the board would like me to. But with that, I would stand for any questions or consideration of the resolution.
Hey, board members, any questions on the resolution or the attachment? Okay, I think we may have someone here from the American Falls Reservoir Group that wants to further persuade us of this project.
Well, good morning, board and Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I'm here to persuade you, but just thank you for your continued consideration of this application and the funding on behalf of the applicants and in particular the Reservoir District. They appreciate your help in addressing these ongoing costs, and all the space holders in American Falls Reservoir appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any further discussion? Entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
I so moved.
Okay, all right, Brian moved and Dale seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have one more to look at.
Mr. Chairman, the second resolution is a resolution to approve contract terms and conditions for Gooding Flood Control and Lost Valley Reservoir Enlargement Projects with an attachment A. There is a resolution in your materials that references approval of conditions in attachment A. And then there are terms and conditions that were reviewed by the Finance Committee for Gooding Flood Control, and those were recommended for approval. And then Lost Valley Reservoir Enlargement. That was discussed at the Finance Committee, but I don't think there were terms and conditions that were recommended. So we do have Amy Castle on the line here that can speak to any of those if you do have questions about those. And with that, I would stand for any comments or questions, and there is a resolution before you.
Okay, we have a resolution. Amy, is there anything we need to understand about the terms and conditions regarding the Lost Valley Reservoir project?
Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate, if we could scroll down. Okay, I would appreciate a quick review of bullet 2, 3, and 4. I took notes during the Finance Committee meeting. I hope I captured what was requested of staff in those that are specific to Lost Valley. So yeah, I would appreciate a quick review of that by the Finance Committee members or anyone on the board, honestly, to see if I did capture that correctly.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Amy, I did review that a couple days ago, and it is the way my memory reflected as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Cole-Hansen.
Okay, I as well think that you've captured what the Finance Committee contemplated would be the appropriate terms and conditions. Okay, is there any further discussion on the terms and conditions for either one of these projects or the resolution? I'd entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Dean and Brian. Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, all right, thank you, Neely and Amy. Oh, we got one more? Oh, yes, we do.
All right.
Somebody in the back of the room may have panicked. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll be asked to consider a resolution for request from funding from the Lewiston Orchards Irrigation District. Just a little bit of background. As you'll recall, back in July of 2021, the board adopted the initial regional water sustainability priority list. The initial list did include a reference to the Lewiston Orchards Irrigation District project. On November 28th, 2022, Lloyd submitted a request to the board to remain on that list. The board did choose to keep the Lloyd project on the list in January of 2023. On December 4th, 2023, Lloyd submitted a request for funding to move forward with a replacement irrigation water supply. And it's requesting $1,287,000 in funding to move engineering and design to a 30% level. A representative from Lloyd attended the Finance Committee on January 11th and provided the board's Finance Committee with a presentation on the project. And that representative, Barney Metz, is here in attendance today in case the board has any questions. And with that, I would stand for any questions or comments, and there's a draft resolution prepared for your consideration.
Okay, I wonder if Mr. Metz would like to come up and provide any information or be available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. We truly do appreciate the consideration of supporting this project as it moves forward. And truly, you guys have been fantastic partners for us and from the moral support department, because this is a monumental transition for us as we move forward in time and with our difficulties. And I would gladly stand for any questions from the board today.
Okay, do you have any questions for Mr. Metz? Any further questions on the resolution from Neely or staff?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment, and Barney, we've been dealing with this project, kicking it around for several years now, and real important project. Time is of the essence. It needs to move forward. I think this is real essential to get this moved to the next design stage.
I'll second.
That practically sounded like a motion, and I have a second, so. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the resolution. Is there any discussion? We'll proceed to vote. Jennifer, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Barker, absent. Ms. Cole-Hansen? I'm gonna abstain for conflict of interest.
Mr. Gibbs,
Aye.
Mr. McMahon,
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead,
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson,
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone,
Aye.
and Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay, good luck. Okay, ESPA recharge projects.
Wesley will talk about this item, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so I have three resolutions for you to consider. These were talked about pretty extensively yesterday at the Aquifer Stabilization Committee meeting. And so the first one is the South Fork Recharge Basin site construction. And just as a brief summary, what we're looking at here is a total cost of a little over $5.8 million. Potential recharge capacity in between 90 and 120 CFS. And what this will look at is the excavation and construction of a new recharge basin, installation of headworks and delivery infrastructure, and also the construction of two monitor wells and associated monitoring instrumentation. So with the resolution, make that a little bit bigger, a little easier for people to read. I won't go through all the whereases and just kind of skip down to the therefores, which is pretty straightforward. I would stand for any questions, and also Mr. Schuster is also online if you have any questions for him.
Okay, first of all, board members, do you have any questions for Wes? Okay, Mr. Schuster, thank you for being here with us today. I think you've provided some materials for us to look at that might answer some of the questions that came up in the Aquifer Stabilization Committee meeting yesterday. Welcome. Do you have any comments?
No, I just know that there were a few questions, and so I quickly pulled together some information in response to those questions, and would request that the proposal be approved today so that we can move forward with this project. We think it's a good project, both for Progressive Irrigation District as well as for recharge efforts in eastern Idaho.
Any questions? I have a couple. What sort of, have we done any engineering work beyond the work to design the diversion works in the canal? Have we done any core drilling or anything to determine how much topsoil we got to move to get down to gravel? And then if is there another layer of impermeable material below the gravel? What kind of, I know we're just kind of basing this off of some of the other sites that we've developed in this area, but do we have any engineering work done that would help enlighten us as to the potential success of this project?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, except for just using the driller logs in the area, no, we do not.
Okay. Do we have any idea how much topsoil's got to be moved before we get to a permeable layer of gravel that will accept an efficient recharge volume?
So we don't have any of that information. I don't know if Mr. Schuster has some of that information.
No, I don't think I have any information other than the fact that Progressive Irrigation District owns the Riker pit, which is, I think, less than a mile away. And we've had success with tests that have been run in the Riker pit as far as the ability to drink water in this location. So we feel pretty confident that this pit will be successful and we'll be able to drink a lot of water.
Okay. Board members, any other thoughts? Any other questions? Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Chairman, I have some concerns as we go forward on this. I'd like to have some more information on what really is there, how much topsoil. I know we can tell from the others, but I have some concerns that we don't have some of these issues really quantified of how much topsoil, and some of the other issues in there at this time. I think it could be a good project, but I think there's some of these issues we'd like to quantify before we go forward.
Okay, other thoughts? Is Mark, do you have a question?
I do kind of, regarding the topsoil. What do you do with the topsoil? You're gonna take it over there and spread it over other acreage that you're gonna put the gravel on top of, so you're gonna increase the layer of topsoil there and then pile gravel, or what's the plan? Is the topsoil being sold? I guess I do have a little concern about the topsoil. What happens then?
Well, I think the plan would be to stack the topsoil separately from what I would call the pit run. And again, Progressive Irrigation District, we're not in the business of running a gravel pit or selling topsoil. That's not our interest. That's not our goal. That's not our design. We are an irrigation district and we want to deliver irrigation water and participate in recharge projects. But the plan is to begin with to remove the topsoil, stack that separately from the gravel, which is beneath the topsoil.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I think in the Aquifer Stabilization Committee yesterday, it was indicated that Progressive has this parcel of property under contract. What are the terms of that contract? How much latitude do we have as far as time to gather some more of this information and not cause a lapse of that contract or a difficulty in moving to closing if that should be the final decision?
Yeah, we're scheduled to close in February. So if we don't have approval today, we are probably going to not have this property under contract any longer. I don't know if the seller would be willing to give us some sort of an extension or not, but as of today, if we don't get approval, then we're not going to be able to move forward with the purchase under our current existing contract.
Okay, this is one of those awkward pauses that sometimes we have as we're all contemplating what to do next.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with the area, but some of the testimony we heard yesterday that it has a lot of good possibilities, and I'm sure there's some unknowns out there, but we wait much longer. I don't know if it'll be on the table time we come back in March.
Well,
Deal with it.
I would suggest that if the board has some concerns that we look to see if some of those concerns could be addressed, that we could hold a special board meeting to approve this project prior to the deadline for closing. In the meantime, we could ask Progressive to see if they could get an extension on the contract and delay closing for 30 days to give us a little time. That maybe they could run out there with a backhoe and dig a couple of holes and answer some of these questions and get back to us with some more information. I don't know, what's your pleasure, board
Mr.
members?
Chairman, I would feel better about that. I mean, not that it's, I think it's got some real potential, but, you know, we're also, I think we'd like to have some questions. There's some risk associated with it also. And on this short of a timeline of you know, getting the information, I'd feel better about, like you said, if we have to call a special board meeting, let's get some more information about it. So.
I think I can.
Brian?
Mr. Chairman, I've got pretty high confidence, you know, from other pits in the area and just that, you know, how the irrigators lose water in that area, that this would be a good recharge site. But I think if we can, have our staff and Progressive, get a little information on the depth of topsoil and the likely permeability at the bottom of that topsoil, that we could get in a special meeting. I think, important to act pretty fast on this one if it does prove the permeable.
I would support that.
Okay.
You want to table this?
Well, I want to, before we do that, I want to ask Mr. Schuster if he would be comfortable approaching the seller to see if we could get an extension, or if Progressive could get an extension, and then report back to us as soon as he gets an answer to that. I don't want this whole thing to fall apart. And when you say February, is that February 1st or February 15th, or how much time do we have?
I believe it's February 1st. I would certainly be happy to request an extension to see if we could have a little more time. I guess I understand the concern is just over the amount of topsoil perhaps in this area. I will mention the Anderson Canal runs through the property, and the Anderson Canal loses a lot of water through this stretch. That was one of the reasons we were so excited about the ability to purchase this property, is we already use the Anderson Canal to do some recharge in the spring, just because of the fact that it loses so much water right in this stretch. So I am willing, though, to go ask the seller if they might extend our deadlines.
If you'd be willing to do that and get back to us, I think we'd like to delay taking action on it. I'm sure that you can understand that we want to be very careful. This is probably the first time that we've spent this kind of money in acquisition costs. And we want to make sure that we do this the right way, and that we don't start out with a project that doesn't work out and be left with a substantial expenditure there that we don't know what to do with. So if you're agreeable to that, based on what I'm seeing looking around the room, I think we would like to delay taking action on this today. Is that a fair assessment, board members?
Yes.
Okay, I think everybody's shaking their head in the affirmative, Mr. Schuster. So if you could do a little bit of checking with the seller and see if we can't buy some time and work through answering some more of these questions, it would be very appreciated on our end.
All right, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just for staff's clarification, you know, you've mentioned how much topsoil. Any sense of like how far down you would like us to check to get a better sense of what's going on here? And kind of what I'm wondering is like, you know, are we talking 5-10 feet, or would you like to go down?
Well, if I think we need to see if we can get down to where there's good gravel that's got the right characteristics for recharge. And if that's 2 feet, then that's 2 feet. If it's 12 or 15 feet, then, I mean, if you can't reach gravel, that may be an indicator that there's not adequate funding in this proposal to for excavation in preparation for the site. So those are some of the things I think we need to get answered.
So the basin, the initial proposal is taking it down 15 feet.
Yeah.
So would you like us to go like 20 feet to make sure we know what's below that 15?
Whatever it takes.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you get
Yeah, that's
into
fine.
good gravel after 10 feet or whatever, and you can come back and with
Okay.
confidence tell us you think that we're in a good area that will accept recharge readily. That's all I think that's the question that the board would like to have answered.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for that clarification. Because what staff will, while Mr. Juicer's doing his part, staff will be working on getting a plan put together of how to get that testing done as soon as we can.
And again, if the seller declines an extension, then I don't know how quick we can get these questions answered, but we will work with Progressive to try and keep this project alive.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, so for the next resolution.
Yeah.
You need a motion to table this proposal? You don't need that? Okay.
No, we didn't have a motion to
Yeah,
adopt,
okay.
so I think we're parliamentarily, I think we're correct. Okay, next one.
So the next one it's a study on the Butte Market Lake Canal System. And so what the proposal is for $94,000. Basically, an engineering firm is going to come in and look at the whole canal system, where the choke points are, and really looking at how to improve the delivery capacity, not only to assist with the recharge project that we're developing there, but also to develop potential recharge project in the future. Again, this was discussed yesterday at length, and I would stand for any questions right now.
Hey, any questions on this proposal? Brian?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. I think when we do get the good years for recharge, we're gonna need a lot of capacity in canals in this area and in the South Fork areas. So I think that this study to figure out how much capacity we do have in that canal, particularly with some future possible recharge opportunities, I think this is, I would move that we approve this study.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Pat seconds. Any discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Jennifer, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Barber absent. Ms. Cole-Hansen.
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs.
Aye.
Mr. McMahon.
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone.
Aye.
Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay,
Next.
so the last resolution I have for you to consider is with the Butte Market Lake Canal Company again. And this is to expand the recharge well that we've drilled in that area. And so this is the addition of 2 wells, improvement of access road to the wells and canal infrastructure to improve delivery to the wells. So what they're asking for is $571,000. And I would stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions on this proposal? Dean.
Mr. Chairman, we talked about this yesterday. It looks like this is a good project. I make a motion that we accept this resolution.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Jennifer, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Barber absent. Ms. Cole-Hansen.
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs.
Aye.
Mr. McMahon.
Aye.
Mr. Olmstead.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Van Stone.
Aye.
And Chairman Raybould.
Aye. Motion carries.
And thank you very much.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate your efforts. Okay. Let's just do that under non-action.
Next is administrative rules update.
as you know, with Matt Weaver's promotion to director, he could no longer, be the department's rules coordination officer.
I personally don't see why not, but anyway.
Is that his decision?
So Director Weaver was able to offload that responsibility onto somebody else, and he offloaded it onto Eric Bowe. Eric is our manager of the department's groundwater protection section. And with his new assignment also as the rules coordination officer, you'll be seeing a lot more of him in the future.
Well, welcome, Eric, and congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know that it was one of the most satisfying parts of then Assistant Director Weaver's work at the department, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it equally as much.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on our rulemaking efforts. In 2023, the department conducted zero-based regulation rulemaking on the department's water appropriation rules and the board's rules and minimum standards for the construction and use of injection wells. For the water appropriation rules, after a lively participation in the negotiated rulemaking process, the department ended up publishing proposed rules in the October bulletin in 2023. Ultimately, the department published the pending rule in its final form on January 3rd of this year. And we are scheduled to present the pending rule to the Senate and House committees on January 29th and 31st coming up. For the injection well rules, the department received approval from the Division of Financial Management in September of last year to continue the negotiated rulemaking process into 2024. As Mr. Chairman and the board may recall, during my last presentation on August 16th of 2023, interest in injecting recycled municipal and industrial wastewater into Idaho's drinking water aquifers came to light while beginning the rulemaking process last spring. This new to Idaho concept obviously generated a number of questions and concerns that needed to be addressed in our rule, explicitly in the rule. At the recommendation of the board last fall, we did collaborate with the Department of Environmental Quality to ensure that the draft rules were sufficiently protective of our valuable groundwater resources. We met with DEQ engineers and administrators on August 17th of 2023, and again on November 13th of 2023. Currently, the department's working on incorporating comments and edits following the meeting with DEQ staff. When the draft is complete, we plan on scheduling a public meeting to review the comments, seek additional comments on the updates. I anticipate probably one or two more public meetings before we can draft a proposed rule that would be ready for the October bulletin in 2024. That would put us on track for a pending rule in December of 2024, and then presenting the rule to the House and Senate committees in 2025. As we begin 2024, Director Weaver did authorize the promulgation of 3 additional rules for the 2024 period, with anticipated hearings in the 2025 legislative session. They include Idaho Department of Water Resource Rules, 370301 are adjudication rules, 370302 are beneficial use exam rules, and then also the Idaho Water Resource Board rules, 370309 are well construction standard rules. For the board's well construction rules, we are currently working on finalizing the draft recommendation memo, prospective analysis, and notice of intent. We anticipate submitting the NOI in its final form to DFM on or by March 10th, which would allow us to advertise or be published in the April administrative bulletin. And that would allow us, after a 21-day period, to have our first public meeting in the end of April. For the department's beneficial use exam rules, we plan on submitting final versions of the NOI to DFM again by March 10th. And that'll be again included in the April bulletin with following a public meeting later in April. And finally, the department's adjudication rules, we plan on submitting final versions of the NOIs to DFM on April 7th so that it can be included in the May bulletin. The first public meeting then would be towards the end of May. with that, I think that sums up where we're at on the rulemaking front. I appreciate the opportunity to give you everybody an update, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, thanks for the update. Any questions, Mr. Bo? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up, we have potential legislation of interest. Here comes our guy with all the legislative info.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the 2024 legislative session has commenced, and I'm here to talk to you about some legislative ideas that are circulating out there and being discussed. If you have any questions as I'm going along, please don't hesitate to stop me. Happy to talk more detail about these things. Let's start first with Class 2 injection wells. Last meeting, you might recall, I talked a little bit about that department is going to be proposing legislation this session related to Class 2 injection wells. Now, these are the wells that take the waste stream from oil and gas wells and then inject that waste stream back into the ground. Several years back, the state of Idaho gave the program that regulates these wells back to the EPA. We told the EPA to please take this back. And at that time, we had legislation out there that references Class 2 injection wells. So this bill just does some housekeeping measures in Idaho code, removes those references to Class 2 injection wells in the statute. So really, again, housekeeping legislation. Good news is that the Idaho Water Users Association voted to support this legislation. And even better news, just even this week, we had our print hearing on the bill and it got voted to be printed and is now identified as House Bill 402. So good progress with regards to this legislation, already moving forward quickly, which is good to see. Now, let's talk about the National Flood Insurance Program. Last meeting, I talked a little bit about this, that legislation is being proposed that would modify the definition in Idaho code related to development, and which defines the operation, cleaning, maintenance, and repair of water delivery systems. Now, this legislation was being discussed with IDWR and other entities because FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, came forward with certain concerns with regards to how development is defined in Idaho code. And FEMA threatened suspension of the state's federal flood insurance management program if those definitions do not change. So we have this legislation going forward that would bring Idaho's statutes back into conformance and not conflict with the federal regulations out there with regards to the National Flood Insurance Program. The good news is, last time I talked to you, I was a little bit skeptical about this legislation being able to be made this year. We had a little bit of flexibility in our window with regards to FEMA. They said that these things need to be changed by 2025. So we could have waited another legislative session, but we were able to work with the water users, address some concerns. I talked previously about we have right now a guidance program in place. FEMA came forward and offered some statements of support with regards to the current guidance program. So the water users actually came forward and voted in support of this legislation, and so voted to support it, which was really good news. We do not yet have a print hearing on that bill. It's actually not a bill that's being carried by IDWR. These statutes are in another state agency's section, and so we're going to be working closely with that other agency to ensure that those statutory changes are made. But we do anticipate that this legislation will go forward, and since we do have the support of the water users, we do hope that it's going to be successful.
Question.
Mr. Chair. Eric, on the National Flood Insurance, if that doesn't pass, will that negatively affect or adversely affect the city of Gooding and the FEMA grant that they received?
I don't, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, I don't know enough about that particular grant, but as my understanding is that this really looks to the flood insurance protection when people go out and get flood insurance from FEMA for potential flood damages to them. So I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure in that answer.
You have a quote? Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Joanne, the City of Gooding project to reconstruct the Littlewood River Channel through Gooding is a Corps of Engineers project, not a FEMA project.
Okay. We're fine. Continue. Sounds good. Let's talk domestic exception. So for years, there has been concern raised out there by certain groundwater users over the ESPA that the current domestic exception is unfair, that while they're going out and doing so much to try to improve the groundwater recharge activity or groundwater recharge out in that basin, we continue to have development of small domestic water users, and that these other groundwater users don't believe that they're contributing enough to those activities. And I reported last time to you that the Idaho Water Users Association had put together a domestic exception legislative subcommittee to study this issue and to talk about potential legislation there. And they've been doing a lot of work. And I talked a little bit last time about some of that work that's coming up. One of the ideas that's floated up there is that is the idea to remove the domestic exception for subdivisions, right? So if somebody comes in with a 50 or 100 acre home subdivision, remove the domestic exception so they won't go out and drill individual wells, and will have to come forward with some sort of mitigation associated with that project. Concern, of course, was raised by developers, and to lessen some of the impact on the developers, the idea has been floated out there with regards to mitigation. And are there going to be ways to make it easier for developers to mitigate? And one idea that was floated out there was for developers to come in and pay a fee to the board and to offset some of those activities. The other idea that was floated out there was for there to be a running mitigation bank operated by the board. Now, comments have been provided to that work group by Chairman Raybould and others that there are serious concerns with regards to this approach, and that additional discussions need to occur before that really moves forward. So at the Idaho Water Users Legislative Committee meeting earlier this week, no action was taken with regards to any legislation, and the chair of the Idaho Water Users Association, or I should say the executive director of the Water Users Association, Paul Harrington, said that that committee will continue with its work. So what I have to report to you here today is that there is no legislation out there currently, which is, I think, from what I've heard from board members, is a good thing. But discussions will continue, and I will work with Chairman Raybould and Brian to keep you apprised as those discussions continue in case something does come up that might implicate the board. That's all I had on domestic exception. I got one other topic, unless there's questions on domestic exception. All right, we'll keep moving. Last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is a legislative idea being floated out there about the Eastern Snake Plain River Aquifer Area of Common Groundwater Supply, the ESPA Area of Common Groundwater Supply, right? What is that? Well, the Area of Common Groundwater Supply effectively defines the area of the Surface Water Coalition delivery call. Who is potentially going to be subject to a delivery call out on the ESPA? And so it's boundary, and that boundary is set in the conjunctive management rules. There have been discussions out there for a number of years, but also starting more so now, about either increasing that boundary or maybe just doing away with the rule that sets that boundary altogether. Now, again, Idaho Water Users Association has established a legislative committee to examine this issue. No action was taken by the committee at the most recent meeting, but it is anticipated that those discussions will continue. And so I bring this up to you today, not because we have specific legislation, but I think there's a likelihood there'll be discussions out there, and I thought the board members might want to be aware of that issue circulating out there. And if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to give me a call sometime. So again, no legislation yet, but that does not mean that we might not see something. So stay tuned. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Okay, and before we let Garrett go, any questions? I'm sure you, but Brian.
Just a little confusion, Garrett. So if the Rule 50 went away, what would set the model boundary then? Or?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, that's a good question. In a delivery call proceeding, the director would still have to set the area common groundwater supply. The question is then begged, how does he go about and do that? Would he have to have a separate administrative proceeding now to set it? I think that just doing away with that rule altogether leaves a lot of unanswered questions out there that we don't quite know.
Anything else? Anything else? Okay, thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll hear of additional legislation as time goes on. Okay, I think we're down to the director's report. Welcome, Director Weaver.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I feel like I've spoken to too many people far too much this week, so I'll keep my comments very brief. I will just say that I thoroughly enjoyed Mr. Morrison's presentation, which I observed from my desk. I thought he did a great job of making that very understandable for folks. I thought it was very interesting engineering work. As an engineer, I appreciated getting that level of technical feedback. And I thought his pictures really helped us down here in Boise understand the issues that they're having up there. And just what a challenge to have to do that work in the wet and in the snow and in the cold. So I thought that was a great presentation. Quick comments on rulemaking. In the past, the well construction rules have been a heavy lift to get modified. I know we went several years in getting the last version of the well construction rules promulgated. That was probably during my tenure here at the department, but early on, maybe in 2010, 2012. I think Mr. Bowe's done a great job of managing the relationship with the Well Drillers Association in the state. And I know they've got some things that they're interested in and some things that we're interested in. So hopefully there can be some mutual dialogue there that advances everyone's interests. And this will be an easier lift this go around than it was last time. I also listened to Sasha's presentation to you on the budget. I thought I would just give you a little bit of my perspective on that process. Even though I observed the budget process as deputy director, being in the middle of it, receiving all of the outreach from legislators, from DFM and from LSO, it's certainly a different perspective. And then layered on top of that is this is a new process that they've adopted this year. Our and yours maintenance budget was passed on Tuesday. And you heard Sasha speak to that. There was a placeholder in there for CEC that included 1%. And hopefully that gets taken up further down the line and increased. For those of you who don't know, annually, the Division of Human Resources issues a CEC report. And it recommended 4.5% increase in CEC to all state employees with a 5.5% increase to engineers in recognition of the challenges of retaining those positions. Our budget that was adopted is 3%. CEC increase, and that's the one that we are to support and address when we meet with legislatures, which I'm sure some of you at least will, like me, have those individual conversations. I will just say in the future, though, we need to try and get those CEC amounts up in future fiscal years to just help with that retention.
Mr. Director, just to clarify, I think it's incumbent upon you to support the 3%. I'm not sure those of us on the board might not be able to have a varying opinion on that.
Very good. Sasha outlined a number of the line item enhancements that we have to our budget. We have 2 supplemental requests regarding our fiscal year 2024 budget. As I understand the process, those will get individual votes up or down in committee and then on the floor. So I've talked to a number of legislators that are wary of this process because it's new and because of some of the challenges that it could present when those individual line items come up for a vote. Our JFAC presentation is this upcoming Wednesday. I know Jeff and I plan to be there. Brian will be there. What Sasha reviewed to you were the slides that we prepared, that I've prepared, that will not be spoken to with that JFAC presentation. They will be posted online. What will be presented at that JFAC hearing are slides that have been prepared by LSO, and the LSO analyst will be the person that speaks to our budget. And then if questions come up during that setting, Jeff and I or others will have to answer those questions. And I would anticipate at least that we'll get a question about the $30 million line item in our budget. So we're going to be prepared to answer that. So between rule presentations, legislative initiatives, budgeting, and just responding to general legislative outreach during this time of the year, I'm just reminded that we do have guidance that comes from the governor. It's pretty explicit guidance on how to do that. And if we do get requests for information from legislators, we are to let Jamie Neal, he's our policy director in the governor's office, and Lisa Harriet, our DFM analyst, know about those inquiries. So feel free to follow up with them, but just try to loop those folks back in. I think Jennifer Strange or Megan Jenkins can help you if you need to get information to those folks. Non-executive branch legislation, if we're going to support that in a hearing, we're supposed to clear that first, again, with our policy director, Jamie Neal, in the governor's office. At the JFAC budget hearing, at least my explicit direction is if I'm asked about enhancements to the budget that aren't included in the governor's initiative, I'm to respond no comment. And then finally, media inquiries. I know many of you are talking to the media. Just remember, if we get questions about our budget or other legislation that affects the board of the department, we just need to loop the governor's office back into that. And so already I've found that you get, at least I'm getting enough inquiries and requests that it's challenging to always to remember to follow the guidance. I'm doing my best. Hopefully I get some forgiveness on the few instances that I've forgotten already. So that's all I've got for you. It's a busy week. I'm glad to see it coming to a conclusion. Any questions?
Any questions for Matt? Okay, thanks, Matt. You did an excellent presentation of the water users. Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. We're down to non-action items, and the chair needs to take a little liberty. Mr. Bybee, I think you've come from far away, and I kind of skipped over you back when we were dealing with the business of your interest. If you wanted to take a minute, we could certainly allow that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Water Board, I want to stand and personally thank you for this opportunity of partnering with the Sunnydale Irrigation District. My name is Brooke Bybee. I am a member of its board, and I want to thank you on behalf of our patrons. In 2001, 2007, 2016, and 22 were all years of short irrigation seasons for the Sunnydale Canal, the earliest of which we ran out of water as soon as the 12th of July. And so our vision for the future is water efficiency, to try to be more fruitful and productive with what we have. And so that is our vision, and we want to say thank you for your support on behalf of working with us to put a big puzzle piece in place and try to keep more of our water where it's usable, our storage water particularly. So thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. Okay, non-action items. Dean. Pat. Joanne?
I would like to just note that one of the other staff that we work with on a regular basis, Cynthia Bridge Clark, was also promoted to bureau chief. Congratulations to Cynthia.
You stole my thunder, Joanne.
I did not include that on my report on Tuesday because I wasn't sure if that was public yet or not. Okay. All right. That is well done. Okay. Brian. Dale.
Good week of meetings, and they did a good job at the meetings we had over at the Riverside and learned a lot. So good.
Okay. Brian.
Nothing from me, Mr. Chairman. Mark is still on the line if he is.
Oh, Mark.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank you folks for allowing me to participate from afar, and hopefully this is the only time that happens, but missed the meetings, and I apologize, but I thought you had a good meeting today, and I was thankful to be able to participate via Zoom.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Before I give the mic to Brian to outline us for coming weeks. One thing I've had in my mind, I think we ought to be thinking about is I've attended the ESPA Aquifer Advisory Committee meetings. It looks to me like we may have to, or at least we should consider developing a program to work with irrigation entities in eastern Idaho to do conversions from groundwater to surface water. And perhaps have some kind of a funding program for that, similar to the aging infrastructure funding program or something along those lines. We probably want to go to the finance committee and ask them what they thought, but be thinking about that, because I think that may be one of the components to resolving some of the issues on the ESPA is converting acres from groundwater to surface water, especially when those acres lie within an organized irrigation district or canal company. Okay, Brian.
You have several things coming up, as Director Weaver mentioned. The Joint Finance Appropriation Committee hearing on the department's proposed budget will be next Wednesday morning, January 24th. I believe that's right at 8 a.m. I know Chairman Raybould is planning to attend. Any of the other board members who would like to attend, please let me know. It also will be live streamed for those of you that would like to watch it by remote. We are working to schedule agency presentations to both the House Resources and Senate Resources Committees. Remember, in years past, the director and the chairman have gone in and done a joint presentation to those committees. Those are not yet scheduled. We're working to schedule those. Those likely should be sometime in early to mid-February. Then your next regular board meeting is scheduled on March 28 and 29 back here in Boise.
Okay, anything else?
That's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
And I think we could assume there could be some committee meetings and some other things. I know Mr. Olmstead is anxious to schedule a storage committee meeting. And
yes,
and there's some other things that we probably need to deal with. And then we made a commitment to Progressive Irrigation District to deal with that recharge project. So that'll be coming up shortly. Okay, I think unless someone objects, Mr. Van Stone could make his motion.
So I'm moving that we adjourn.
Okay, is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think we made it, well.
It's according to Verizon, we're noon on the dot. Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
all right, thank you.